Hello and welcome to Fairygodboss live webinar. I know we have people calling in from absolutely everywhere today, and we'd love to see where you're calling from in the chat, get a sense of who's in what time zone and how hot it is where you are. So I'm Victoria Long, Director of Enablement and Design Ops at Publicis Sapient Salesforce practice. And before we get started, I have a couple of quick announcements. This second session will be recorded and shared via email with everybody who's registered. And during this discussion, we'd love to hear from you. So we're looking in a couple of places. We'll be looking in the chat, and we'll try to answer some questions as we go along, but we'll also be looking at some questions at the end of the conversation today. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and kick off finding a workplace that empowers you to chart your own course. Something I feel passionately about myself. I know everybody on the panel does, and sponsored by Publicis Sapient. We have 4 leaders with us today from Publicis Sapient: Jenna, Stacy, Kelly, and Rachel. We'd like to take a minute for each of them to introduce themselves, hear what's going on in your life personally, professionally, and in your role today at Publicis Sapient. Kelly, we'd love to go ahead and start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Victoria. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly. I am based out of Denver, Colorado. I am a solution architect here at Publicis Sapient. In my free time, I love taking advantage of living here, hiking during the summer, snowboarding during the winter. And I have a corgi who I'm obviously obsessed with, as everyone with corgis is. So you may or may not hear him, hopefully not during today's chat, but very happy to be here.
Hey everyone, I'm Jenna Kinley. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana, and we have a rare, not a million degrees day today, so I'm pretty pumped about that. I am the director of Salesforce MarTech strategy here at Publicis Sapient. I've been within the Salesforce ecosystem for the vast majority of my career as a digital marketer. On a personal note, I am trying to get my family ready for vacation later this week, so I'm pretty excited about that. Professionally, working on a lot of really cool projects with my team, and then also working with some really cool clients that I'm pumped about. So excited to be on this call today with my awesome colleagues, and thanks to Fairygodboss for having us.
I'm Stacy. I'm a senior solution architect here at PS. I've been here for 4 years, but originally started on the other side of consulting as the client using Salesforce for a tech company. So I've been on one side of being the user of Salesforce, and now I'm on the consulting side, where we have a great team in the marketing group working towards Salesforce CDP, Marketing Cloud, and a few other exciting bleeding edge products from Salesforce. In my free time, I really like bike riding, specifically mountain biking and hiking. So kind of like Kelly out here in Boulder, Colorado, making the most of my time outdoors.
Hi, y'all. My name is Rachel Hubel. I am calling in from Boise, Idaho, single office of 2-ish people. And I use the pronouns she, her, hers. And I've been with the organization for about 6 years, and I am a Salesforce solution architect, really focusing on the Salesforce core platform and focusing on our B2B business. So really think about Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, as well as B2B commerce. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, everybody in the chat. This is really great. It took me a second to find the box, but I see we've got people from Las Vegas and Raleigh and Sao Paulo, Brazil, New York City and Colorado. So all over, and lots of hot and humid comments. I'm also in Boise, Idaho, and today it's a little bit cooler. It's only going to get up to maybe 95. So appreciate you all calling it. Oh, I see Chicago. Yep, Chicago has that humidity in the summer. So I grew up there, so very much hearing that. So thanks all for joining. I want to go ahead and jump into the actual discussion. Just a reminder, we are recording and we are answering questions. So I'm going to do my best to keep track of the comments, as we go along, and then we'll see if we can leave a little bit of time at the end as well to respond to as many as we possibly can. So we've got a couple of topics that we want to go through under the heading, of course, of finding a workplace that empowers you. And I want to go ahead and ask the panel from the start of how you found your roles with Publicis Sapient. What was that experience for you? And I think, Jenna, I wonder if we can ask you to start on that one.
Yeah, I think with the exception of you, I might be the newest to Sapient. I just hit my 4-month mark, started in March. And my path to Sapient was an interesting one. So I've started off my career in a very creative space and worked my way more toward technical and digital marketing and all that fun stuff. And I was at a consultancy that was very much rooted in the Salesforce world, and it was all MarTech. We didn't do much core or anything like that. And I was at a place where it was time for me to explore my next big option in terms of what's my next step. And I really attribute it to Kismet. I've been aware of Sapient and Publicis Group for many years, having come from that sort of creative background. But the Kismet was, I wound up speaking with someone in our talent team who she's fantastic. And I took a call kind of on a chance and really just fell in love with everything she had to say about a company. And, with an asterisk that sometimes companies aren't always that way, but just kept talking to people. In fact, Stacy was one of the people I got a chance to talk to. And what I loved was that there was no conversation around bullet points on a job description. It was very much art of the possible. And that, for me, is like my happy place. I love to kind of craft my own roles. So thankfully, Sapient felt the same way about me as they did about them. And so here I am now. And like I said, even though I'm only 4 months in, I'm still kind of choosing my own adventure with some great bricks with which to lay my foundation. So that's been my journey so far.
I think to add to that, Jenna, you talk about choosing your own adventure and kind of paving your way. For me, I went to school for graphic design and started previously at a print company managing their web to print technology. And I was doing zero Salesforce work, none. And I wasn't happy. I wasn't thriving in my prior company. And so at that point, I made the personal decision to start volunteering. So I was working my day job 40 hours a week, but then I was also volunteering at a local animal rescue. And I was really helping manage their technology database and their website and all of that stuff. And at some point, the COO of the nonprofit said, "Hey, somebody's told me about Salesforce. Rachel, can you implement Salesforce?" And I was like, "Sales what? Like sales? Huh?" And so, it really started my journey into Salesforce. So I started looking at trailheads and really doing self-learning, technical documentation, and having a dev sandbox to get into Salesforce. And as soon as I got in there, I was hooked. The custom objects, the capability to create something custom was really appealing to me and really fulfilled me from a learning standpoint, being able to challenge me on a regular basis. And so as I was going through that nonprofit work, I was actually, Jenna, kind of like you, introduced into one of our hiring teammates. And, she and I were having conversations for a little bit of time, consulting, especially whenever you're on smaller side of things based on project workload. The hiring can be a little fluid. And so, she and I stayed in touch. And at that point, she goes, "I have the perfect project for you to be on. We want you here. Let's get you here." And, it took me, admittedly, it took a lot of networking, right? It took a lot of networking with people in the different organizations. And I'm really happy I found Publicis Sapient and found the hiring manager to get me excited and I've been here 6 years since, right? So teaching myself Salesforce and getting to choose my own adventure. It's like the Goosebumps books, right? Flip forward to page 92 and flip back to page 3. So Jenna, I'm with you that, choosing our own adventure is part of the fun.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well. So my story is kind of similar to what Stacey was mentioning earlier. I originally was in industry at a large oil and gas company, and I was lucky enough to be on the client side of a project that Stacey was implementing while she was at Publicis Sapient. And right from the get-go, we just formed like an immediate connection. We bonded so quickly. And we became really great friends, even outside of the project. And that kind of led me eventually to PS. I moved to Denver, and the first person I thought of was Stacey. And I was like, hey, I just moved. I'm thinking about a new job. I know you're at PS, and I had just had like such a great experience working with you. And I was also interested in moving over to the consulting side. And it was just like, yeah, she just linked me probably to the same hiring manager that Jenna and Rachel have been in contact with, who is amazing, just like everyone else here. And just like immediately forming connections with everyone that I've spoken with at PS just hooked me right away. And on the Salesforce journey aspect of it, I've just learned like an insane amount since I've been here. The learning is just like so accelerated. There's so many different projects that we work on and that I've been able to get exposed to since being at PS. And it's just like really opened my lens to even stuff that I didn't know was capable in Salesforce until I was put on some of these projects. So that's been my journey, and I've never looked back since.
I appreciate these thoughts so much and the sense of community I'm feeling. I want to draw on that a little bit more, Kelly, and everybody else, especially the last couple of years. I know all of us in this group, but probably pretty much everybody on the line as well, has had some different experience with hybrid, with being remote, and with finding community when the way that we're usually finding community is no longer available to us. So I'm just curious to hear if anybody has any thoughts about that, and how you've found community within the Salesforce practice in North America, either related to the pandemic and hybrid experiences, or just in general.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that one first, Victoria. Cultivating connection digitally is hard. Like, full stop. It is hard, and so it takes additional effort. And admittedly, I feel like Publicis Sapient has put in the effort and put in the additional work as we've switched to this in office as well as remote roles. And so, part of that, I have started social hours. So being able to bring our groups together and have non-work conversations. We traditionally have prompts. I've learned about people that go salsa dancing every Thursday. I've learned about people that are professional ballroom dancers. I've learned a wide variety of things that, we get so focused on this work. Taking a moment to pause and get to know each other at a deeper, more intimate level is part of that connection. I think the other part is as the pandemic is shifting to an endemic, right? It is something that we will have to live with, and our ways of working will be forever changed. Having really meaningful and mindful connections in person. So not going into the office to have 17 different meetings, but being able to go into the office and see each other and connect with each other and have a happy hour or have a networking event or have a panel, right? Being able to have those really poignant events, it has been really important. And I think one of the ones that, I have to commend is currently the organization is doing roadshows. So we have a group of people that are traveling to regional different offices and hosting the people in those regions to really foster that connection and foster those meaningful connections in a really specific way, and hopefully gaining that sense of trust and compassion and empathy for your colleagues.
I resonate with that empathy piece. I think as far as it relates to, the Fairygodboss mission, as well as being, a manager that you'd want to have, I think that's where a lot of like the magic starts. And it's no coincidence that the people on the phone are all friends, and that we have all stories outside of this call where we've been in other colleagues' weddings or have them over for dinner parties. And I think you're touching on something that is very, very important to me. And that's around authenticity, and that's around being able to show up as who you are every day for work. Our jobs are difficult enough. And, I'm on a call with about 3 or 4 other high performers who are really, really good at what they do. And I think that first and foremost is some of the magic here, is that there's a lot of really intelligent people who work together. But second, we are able to also be exactly who we are in different spaces. And to me, that is just so refreshing. So even though what we do is difficult and sometimes the days are long, I feel like my cup is filled by my job rather than drained by it. So yeah, that really resonates with me, Rachel.
I appreciate those comments so much. And yeah, this is the first workplace for me that I have felt that level of connection as well, and all of the different touch points that both Rachel and Stacy are mentioning. I want to pull on a thread there, Stacy, and anyone else who wants to comment. I think authenticity has a flip side to it. In that, in order to be authentic, we have to be able to be vulnerable in certain ways, and vulnerable not maybe in the sense that we really are intentionally sharing pieces of ourselves that in other situations aren't there. I wonder if any of you have any comments about how vulnerability and compassion and authenticity play a part in the Publicis Sapient Salesforce practice in your experience while you've been here.
I think vulnerability is the root to all of that success. It's where it's where all of it starts, from authenticity to trust. And when you have those things, you also start to see compassion and emotional safety start to peek through. And that is something that in this day and age, I think people are becoming more aware of the value of. So when we talk about vulnerability, what I think of, first of all, it's being a magnet. It's having the emotional safety, and as well as the confidence in yourself and your abilities, as well as your peers, to not judge you perhaps when you share failures. So being able to share failures, like, that's part of the human experience. And I think previously we've been pushed to deny failure, pushed not to talk about it, pushed to, sweep it underneath the rug. But when you're able to talk about something that went wrong, decision you made that ended up not being so great, something that you overlooked, what have you, you're identifying with a very real and sometimes raw human connection that everyone experiences. And so I look to my managers who have been tremendous at sharing not only their successes, but their failures as well, so that I can hopefully avoid them or know how to navigate them when I come across them. And then in turn, it's allowed me to, I hope, be a better manager for especially some of my managers who are newer to the workforce and PS, to be able to experiment and fail faster so that they can succeed quicker. So that is something I'm really passionate about. And I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts there around either emotional safety or vulnerability.
Yeah, I I was actually just talking about this with a friend of mine the other day, and that work doesn't happen, or like life doesn't stop happening between 8 and 5 or whatever hours you work, right? So knowing that I can come to work and be myself, which I think is what we're all saying, like I can be me, which unfortunately I have no other option. If I could be someone else, maybe I would, but I am who I am. Knowing that I can come to work and maybe not be having my best day and say, hey, Rachel, sorry if I'm off today. Here's what's, I don't have to go into deep details, but like I'm having a rough day. And knowing that Rachel's not going to ask any more questions other than that, she's going to step in and help me. That is so important to my own psychological safety. Also, knowing when I have made a mistake, which we all do, and being able to go straight to my manager and say, hey, look, I screwed up today. Here's what I want to do to fix it, as opposed to feeling the fear of being able to be honest about what I have and have not done. I have unfortunately worked in places that aren't like that, and it is crippling. It's crippling to your progression. It's crippling to your personal health. And so, I mentioned earlier, I'm newer here to Sapient, but one of the things that was so vital to me was feeling like I knew I was going to work with people and not, like robots and skin. So yeah, Sapient was definitely that place where I felt like I can tell, I can be myself. I can be honest.
Isn't that like part of our differentiator too, is that we are not a result at all cost organization. We are up there competing with the best, and I think we are the best in many regards too, which I don't even hesitate to say anymore, because we've grown in such a way that has been super responsible, as well as looking back and nodding towards the culture that allowed us to be successful there. And I think that going back to authenticity and being who you are and being able to recharge too during work as well as after in a healthy environment. I don't know. To me, I totally see the long game plan. I see where PS wants to go. And I think I've drank the Kool-Aid maybe a little bit too much, because I'm just so proud of what we've been able to accomplish and not become some of the churn and burn establishments that we see our competitors in.
I mean, I think, going back to experiences, right? Tell me about a time. This is a very defining moment for me. I was newer to the org, and I was trying to help a salesperson with a level of effort and an estimate and whatnot. And I had messed up some numbers, right? I was trying to do like project management, and I messed up numbers. And I remember going to them and I go, I screwed this up. Like, this was human error. I did this wrong. It's costing us X, Y, and Z dollars. And I just remember him going, Rachel, take a breath. It's going to be okay. We'll get through this. And it was that like, oh, you're not going to like finger wag at me and tell me that, how could you do this and whatnot. And so for me, that was, it happened 4 or 5 years ago at this point, but it's still in my brain of, you know what, this person was caring. This person, helped me recognize I'm a human and help me move forward, right? Turning it into a learning experience and not like this fear of, oh my gosh, I can't ever make this mistake again. And so that was, it's just a really good reminder that, Stacey, we're all human together. We are all in this together, and we all have one life, and we make mistakes. And it's okay that we make mistakes, and we can figure it out as a team.
Does anyone else have any like good failures that they want to share? I know I have a bunch, but does anyone else, Kelly or Jenna or Victoria even? I think that's important too. I think that's part of like what we're talking about too, is be able to bring them up. So I can start with one. When I was at a previous tech company, I was in charge of our email marketing team, and we were sent out a mass email, and at the very last minute, which is a total marketing faux pas, they wanted to change the template. And I agreed to it because I was a yes person and a people pleaser, and I was like, oh, what could go wrong? And I ended up spelling our company's name wrong in the signature, and it went out to some, let's call it 15,000 people. And that was one of those humbling moments of, okay, people are going to find out internally that this happened. So how can I make sure that I acknowledge the mistake first of all, right? We're not trying to sweep anything underneath the rug. How do I say I made a mistake first? Second was apologizing, and a non like hedged apology, just I messed up. And then 3 is what was I going to do to try to fix it? And there were limited things you can do after an email sent to fix it, but I think lessons 1 and 2 are like steps 1 and 2 were the most important part of that, and showing that I actually understood the significance and the potential brand impact of what I had done, and then making sure I had this checklist of how it's never going to happen again. So while that hasn't happened again, other things have, and they will continue to. But I think having that kind of solid North Star of like, what do I do in the face of adversity, and how do I lean on my colleagues and my managers, has really helped me.
Jenna, do you want to go where?
I promise I'll keep mine really quick, but it's
Yeah.
very similar to Stacy's. And it was actually a lesson that I learned about being a human being from a client. So this was eons ago. I sent out their email with the wrong subject line. It didn't even align. And, you think about like, oh, they've spent so much money on this, and, this was supposed to be huge for them. And I reached out to them immediately and apologized and said I screwed up. And I was almost in tears about it because I felt so awful. And the guy goes, Jenna, it's okay. It's just an email. Now, like, you already gave me the plan to fix it, but if this makes you feel any better, I did the same thing as you. There's like a long pattern of us all sending out the wrong emails. But he said, I did the same thing as you, except the subject line said, this is where the bleeping subject goes. And I was just like, it does make me feel better, and it doesn't also for you, but thank you for being kind about the fact that I made a human mistake. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. One that comes to mind for me is when I first became a solution architect and my first time kind of like having that leadership role on my project team. I was still kind of figuring out how to communicate best with the client that I was on. And at the beginning, I was probably a little bit overzealous and overcommitted to a couple of items. And then later, after, speaking to our developers, I realized like there was a couple things that we needed to roll back on or, cut back. And when I first told that to the client, I would say I was scolded slightly by the client, which was a little bit jarring for me, especially, being like a first time solution architect at the time. But what was really comforting was obviously like my team after the fact was like very supportive, and they all understood exactly where I was coming from. There wasn't like any kind of like finger pointing or like, why would you say this or why would you overcommit? It was like, we all totally understand where you're coming from. We know why you said that at the beginning and the reasoning now. So like it was really just what helped me was just like the support of my team and them being understanding, and not a single person like, okay, this is what you could have done better. It was all just very, yeah, like, you're okay, we're here, we stand behind you, and whatever decision you make, like, we're here to back you. And I think that's what's really important.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing a story. And I was so tempted to like try to say, okay, let's get on to the next question. I'm watching the clock here, but I think that that's just such an incredibly valuable thing to talk through. And Isaiah, and I know I butchered that, so please forgive me, but I appreciate that you brought that question up. And also, Jamie, love the comment about honesty and transparency. And Elizabeth, we're going to come back to your question. So I'm just going to read it out there so everybody hears it, but then we'll come back to it at the end. And that's, how did you successfully manage or translate your client-side skills to a consulting workplace at Publicis Sapient? So I'm going to share a quick story myself about a time I felt I failed and carry it into another one of the questions that we wanted to talk about a little bit as a group today. And that is, I was with my boss and my team in Colorado a few weeks ago, and have really not any time in my career until this team felt like I had the reasonable opportunity to say, like, this is not a good space for me. And I said that to my boss. I said, I have been struggling with this particular skill for the last 13 years, and I can solve pretty much anything, but I have never been able to solve this. And I was almost in tears, quite honestly, which is not so much a thing for me. But it turned into an entire conversation about different abilities and neurodiversity and what's a perceived failure versus a real failure. And, how could we actually tackle this together, whether it was like between the two of us or whether that's something that I just simply don't focus on because, like, if you've put 13 years into trying to solve a problem, you're probably putting too much time into trying to solve something that maybe is not a problem. It's just maybe not core to the excellence that you bring and you need to focus somewhere else. So we had that whole conversation and it stunned me. I don't know what else there is to say about it. It really stunned me and it's been a very, very much an encouragement. From that, I want to ask everybody on the panel, what advice do you have for women who have trouble speaking up, getting their voices heard, or comments you might have on neurodiversity or different abilities in the workplace, maybe at how it intersects at Publicis Sapient, maybe just where you've seen interesting stories about that in your professional past?
So I'll take the, women trying to find our voices and speaking up and being heard and all that fun stuff. It's a super nuanced answer. So hopefully I'm not glossing over anything, but this is something that's very near and dear to my heart as somebody who spent the first chunk of my career really being a lot more passive and thinking that if I, for lack of better words, if I took orders, then I would bring value. And there is absolutely a set of people who like that is how they bring value. But what I realized is that wasn't my happy place. I knew the answers to some of the questions that were being asked, and I just wasn't speaking up and saying things. So the advice I would give to women is if you're struggling to speak up, know that speaking up isn't something that you have to do with your mouth. You can always send an email off to just one small group of people if you want to test out that idea to gain some confidence in A, how you present ideas, or B, get some initial gut reactions to thoughts that you have, if that's part of what's holding you back. If you feel like you're not being heard, I highly encourage every single person, regardless of your gender, to think about why you feel like you're not being heard, because there are possibly two ways. One, or there's a billion ways, but let's say you're not framing the answer in the way that makes sense to people. This is something I'm super guilty of. Having come from an English degree copywriting background, I have a tendency to get a little too wordy. And I realize that some people are just better off if you get straight to the point. So I've found that for myself personally. Unfortunately, what I've seen in other companies, and obviously don't feel that here at Sapient, or else I frankly would not be here anymore, is that my opinion wasn't valued to begin with. And I know it's easier said than done to say, oh, just quit your job. But seriously, it's not worth it. Like, every single person has value to their opinions and their thoughts. So I would just really kind of have a good think on that. And if you feel like that is something cultural that's not going to change, just remember that you deserve to be heard. So there are plenty of places out there, I might know of one, where your opinions will be valued. So at the very least, it'll give you, going back to that psychological safety, it'll give you a safe place to start speaking up, to the point that, you get more comfortable being straightforward with your thoughts and opinions and feelings. So
I had a manager who gave me great advice once, and it was along the lines of micro corrections, and that if you give everyone the benefit of the doubt that they mean well and that they're doing their best as well, you're opening the door for I don't want to call it education, but you're able to tell people how their behavior makes you feel. And I had a scenario 5 years ago now, where someone much more senior than me kept interrupting me while I was speaking. And at first I was just so upset, like, okay, what do I do about this? And I eventually sent him a message because I knew I didn't want to get emotional when I talked to him, but I sent him a message, and it was something along the lines of, when you talk over me, what you're telling the rest of the room is that what you have to say is more important than what I have to say. You're invalidating my right to be here and my knowledge as an employee that you hired me for. And he was so just, I think, blown away about and this unemotional statement of, this is how I feel when you do this, that it fixed itself. And I think he was much more cognizant moving forward of when I spoke, or when other women spoke, how it came off when he interrupted. And I think, like, yeah, approaching it with micro corrections of just, don't wait for it to boil over, but also giving people the benefit of the doubt that they're doing the best that they can too, and that hopefully they're interested in evolving and learning and supporting you as well.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, kind of similar to what Jenna was saying earlier, when I first started working, and even like my entire life growing up as an Asian American woman, like I was kind of taught to be much more passive, like just let people who want to say something, and if keep, like, don't push the, I'm forgetting the term, but like just like don't be too much, like don't be aggressive, and that was very, for a long time, very much my mindset. But um also, like Jenna was saying, like being in a workplace that allows you to feel comfortable and supported, and to speak up, like coming here, I feel very valued, and I feel like every time I have something to say or I want to share my opinion, like I know people are listening, and so I'm not afraid to share that. And another thing that has been really helppful at PS is, as a lot of other companies, we have a lot of BRGs, business resource groups, and I'm in a couple, like Women's Leadership Network and the Pan Asian Alliance. And sometimes they even offer training for people who are still maybe like earlier in their career or not like ready to speak up. Things like imposter syndrome training, which I have dealt with imposter syndrome. I know many women deal with imposter syndrome, and it's nice to be able to listen and hear someone like talk about it, and give some ideas on what to do to like move past that. And just being in a group of people who are feeling the same way as you also gives you that kind of like safe space as well. So I think all of those things together, like being at PS, being in a comfortable work environment, having people there to support you, and groups that you're comfortable with, have definitely helped me kind of get out of my shell, and be able to speak up when I feel it's my time to speak up.
This is such a fantastic conversation. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to jump kind of to one of the topics we had on the board, and also a question that Chloe put just in the box. And Elizabeth, have not forgot yours. We definitely are going to come back to that. So Chloe's question was, for those who are not able to use Salesforce on the job currently, but who would like to become familiar with it independently in the meantime, are there any learning tools that you found very helpful? Now, hold the thought. I just want to tie that in to one very tactical question we have about Salesforce at Publicis Sapient. And that is sort of, again, what are the critical skills? And then the slightly less tactical question, which is why Publicis Sapient for Salesforce? And wrap that all together. Like, what do you want to do right now to learn about Salesforce? Why Salesforce at Publicis Sapient? And what's critical if you want to get involved in Salesforce, at this company?
So, I mean, Victoria, to your point, I think that there is the tactical, right? There's some pings coming in terms of the trailheads, the online courses, Discord, etc. But I also think that a differentiator that PS has really focused on in the last year or so is what we call Space Camp. And so Space Camp is a learning program within our organization where we're really focusing on some of those softer skills. So going back to the client skills and whatnot, being able to have the classes and have the capacity, and I want to be really mindful about that. A lot of organizations don't carve out time for training. And so, we are putting forth that we have the capability to train on a regular basis, and it is expected that your time card has training on it. And so, when you're being involved with Space Camp and learning about soft consulting skills. So how to run a BPR, how to use our technology tool set, more than just the basics, but how do we facilitate meaningful conversation with our clients is something that excites me, right? I'm a learner, I'm a lifelong learner. And so being able to carve out this time for learning within Space Camp, within the Salesforce, ecosystem is something that jazzes me, gets me pumped in the morning, Rocky style, like, whoo, ready to go. So Chloe, I think that, the technical skills, there's a lot of technical hard skills out there. As a call out, I've seen people manage all of their job applications in Salesforce, manage their Girl Scout cookie sales in Salesforce. Like, there have been really unique instances that you can apply to your personal life and get your hands-on experience there.
I'm just going to throw this out there. I think, Elizabeth, that's a partial answer to what you're asking about with how do you successfully manage or translate client skills into a consulting workplace. As Rachel is talking about the consultative skills, the soft skills, the how do you negotiate, how do you facilitate the meaningful conversation, like how do you motivate a team? Those are skills that apply absolutely anywhere. So I'm going to see if anyone else wants to add. Jenna, it looks like you're ready.
Yeah, so that was my journey, and I didn't highlight it a whole lot, but I mentioned I've spent most of my career in the Salesforce ecosystem. I started as a client, and I went through exactly what our clients go through now. I was responsible for purchasing this not inexpensive technology. I was, responsible for ensuring that it was implemented properly and worked well with all of the other tools that we had within our organization. I was responsible for finding the ongoing value of it. So once it's all up and running, does it still bring us money? Because that's what, CFOs, that's all they want to see for marketing teams. And then on top of that, I was juggling everything else being a marketing director. So when I wound up in consulting, it came pretty naturally to me because with every single client, I just saw myself as a part of their team. I didn't see myself as working for Sapient. I didn't see myself as working for any of the other consultancies I've been with. And I even started using words like we are going to do this together, and really just placing myself in there. Not so much to feel the everyday fear that can come with being a marketer, but just to make sure that I was reacting to or that I was taking into account where they were at, like what headspace they were in. And Stacey, when you were talking about giving people the benefit of the doubt, like I've had clients come at me real strong sometimes. And instead of having my own like personal emotional reaction to it, I think, man, I bet something's going on. Like I bet they're having a hard day. And I'm not going to be able to figure out, like, they're not going to tell me that their dog is sick. We don't get to be that deep with our clients all the time, but just remembering that I am part of their team, that is what they hired me to be, is really how I made that smooth transition. And I never thought I would love consulting as much as I did, or as I do rather. And I do. I love being able to help. I love being able to alleviate fears. And then, I don't have to talk to anyone's CFO really. So that's nice.
Yeah, and kind of like piggybacking off of that is like being on the client side, you know what they're looking for, you've been in their shoes, so you're kind of almost like one step ahead because you can already determine, like you've been there, you know what they want, what they're looking for. So I think that's really helpful to have been on both sides, because now, especially at PS, because I worked directly with PS as a client, so I knew like how the processes went and like how the project was ran. So it was a pretty easy transition to move over because yeah, you've been there and you know what they're looking for. So that's always helpful to have that experience.
I know, Stacey, you've got a comment, but I want to weave this other question in here from Isaiah, which is about conflicting ways of working and culture between Publicis Sapient the Salesforce practice there, and then clients you might be working with at a time. Like, what happens if you're in a client situation and you're like, well, this is the way that we do things at Publicis Sapient, and that is just like not matching very well with your client. So I'll leave that there. And Stacy, I don't know if you want to take that one on or hand it off to someone else, but either way.
I think that's an important question that we're still working through. So one of the things, at least internally, that I know at the leadership level they're talking about is having on every one of our statement of works this line at the bottom of every document that a CFO and a CEO has to sign that is our mission statement of who we are and what we believe in as a company. Black Lives Matter, women's rights matter, everything that we believe from a sustainability perspective, and having that just be louder than some of the client conflict that sometimes comes into play there. So while we can't control necessarily how our clients come and show up in a space, we can control and be very proud of who we are and what we believe in. Lots of work still to be done here for us and most other groups. There's a lot that we need to continue to work on, but it is something that we recognize as energy that needs to be put towards it. So I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts about maybe on a micro level of, working directly with the client who has different values of how a project should be executed. I'm thinking more of like at a macro level. That is something that I know we need to work on, but I'm proud that we're identifying it as an issue to work on.
Stacy, I think for me, generally speaking, humans are afraid of change, right? And sometimes people think that if you're implementing Salesforce or implementing this system, they're going to lose their job, right? Like this is going to replace me. And I've seen some hostility there, right? People are so incredibly nervous that they're going to lose their job. And coming at it with a curiosity standpoint of why do you feel that way, right? Why? And trying to understand, where this person is coming from, right? So Stacy, going back to your, everybody's doing the best that they can with what they have. We have to be empathetic. It doesn't mean we need to be steamrolled, right? It's not like we need to be able to set our boundaries and not have, get run over, but we need to be empathetic to each other. And Jenna, I think it goes to your point of we kind of become ingrained in their teams, right? And so if we can have those meaningful connections and understand, hey, you're acting this way because you're scared that you're going to lose your job, that this technology is going to replace your job. Hey, what I really want to do is free up your day so you don't have to spend 8 hours checking a box, unchecking a box, pushing paperwork here, doing this way, doing this way. I want you to do actual meaningful change work. And so I think for me, I approach it with a very empathetic, why is this person reacting this way? Why is this person coming on strong, etc.
Yeah, I wanted to throw one bit out about on the cultural side of working with clients. And I don't know that this is exactly a solution, but hopefully it's helpful. So the vast majority of the time, I spend the first chunk of my engagement with a client really trying to get to know them and understand, what makes them happy, what gets them excited. Like I am a person who thrives on excitement, and I have never had a single client where I'm not thrilled by what they're trying to do. And so really the hardest engagements for me are, there are two of them. One is the one where they have no energy, and I just assume that they're just so bogged down and distracted by so many other things. And so for those, I wouldn't say it's a negative thing, but I do have a number of coworkers I can go to and vent a little bit man, I was really excited about this thing I presented. It felt like it fell flat, and, just kind of let it go. And those are the things that you can let go. I have not experienced this in a really long time, but I have had, unfortunately, some clients where, going back to what we were talking about earlier about being heard and feeling valued, they've been really disrespectful. And those I struggle with because on one hand, you're technically hired to do a thing, but on the other hand, there's no amount of money in the world that is worth being disrespected or treated like you are not worthy of having an opinion or a thought. So usually what I do with those situations is, Kelly, I think you were, or maybe it was Stacy. I'm sorry. I'm like everyone. This conversation has been so good. I'm just thinking about all the cool things that have come from it. But talking about, being straightforward with the client and saying, hey, when that happened, that's not okay. Like you got to set boundaries. And it's okay if it's not you who does it. There might be someone who is a better person on the project to have that conversation. But again, that's something where I'm thankful I work for a company where I can go back. Like if I told my manager that a client screamed at me, he would say, that's not okay. That's not acceptable. And there are companies out there that would say, well, they're paying us. So, again, I realize those aren't exactly solutions, but being able to find people you feel comfortable sharing your feelings with, and knowing that people have your back, even if they're not on that project or what have you. And I will say, I have seen in one instance where, again, 40 billion years ago, I'm super old apparently, we had a client who was just so rude to everyone on the team and literally screamed at them, and just like absolutely inappropriate. And our CEO at the time sent an email and said, that's not an acceptable way to treat us. And they apologized. And you know what? It was smooth sailing from there. So it kind of goes back to just like not assuming that you know what's going on in someone's life and giving them a little bit of empathy. And then, second time I'm out. But, sometimes you just have to be straightforward about the way that people make you feel to see improvement.
I love that, Jenna. And I just want to pull out one other piece of that, and that's team. Because I think that is just such a very, very deep theme for every one of us, and certainly everybody I know within the practice. And I had an outlier situation here with when it doesn't work with the client. And I knew that this happened, but I didn't understand it until it happened to me. It was about 10 years into my career. I was working with a client I knew to be fantastic and hard charging and really wanting to do the right thing. And they knew that about me. And it absolutely did not work between the two of our personalities. And it was so shocking, and it was horrible, and it felt absolutely dreadful. But then, to at some point have that conversation with my team and say, I don't understand. They're great. I'm great. This isn't working. And to then have the conversation of, okay, and in a safe space, which it isn't always, but hopefully you can find, where those hinges and pivots and safe spaces are, to say, okay, we need to switch up the team and make it work with the right personalities. And sometimes that feels like the end of your career, right? It did to me at the time. And then, a month later, everything was better. That client was better. Where I was better. Like everything was better. But that's sort of an outlier where sometimes you ask yourself, like, what did I do? What did I do? What did I do? What did I do? And it's like, it's not anything you did. Sometimes it just isn't exactly the right fit. So I would love to see if there are any more questions before we get to the end of today's conversation. We're almost there. We just have a couple minutes left. I'm going to throw out a lightning round question, and then if there are more questions, we'll get back to them. And the lightning question for everybody on the panel is, what advice would you give your younger self?
Andy Warhol has this famous quote where it's something along the lines of, some people let the same problem trouble them for years and bother them for years on end instead of just saying, so what? And I'll never forget the first time I heard that, 'cause, my own problems have always seemed so monumental in the grand scheme of my life. And then I look back on them, especially like 10 years later, and it's, so what? And I just wish it hadn't taken me 10 years to get to that point.
I would say for me, and also I love that quote, Stacy. I would say for me is stand up for yourself and speak up for yourself. I know it takes, again, like we touched on earlier, it takes a lot of, for some people, courage to do that. for me, when I was able to do that and I was able to stand up for myself, I was able to progress my career, learn things that I didn't think I would learn. And it's just no one's going to look out for yourself more than you. So, be true to who you are, stand up for yourself, and speak up when you need to. And you know what's best for you. So, do what you feel is right for you.
I would say if it doesn't feel right, there's probably a good reason why, and you should spend some time unpacking that. There's value in gut feelings. And then the other thing is, especially when I transitioned from not talking at all because I thought that nobody wanted to hear what I had to say to feeling like I had to only talk. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be heard. So, wish I could go back. And also, like, use your moisturizer every single night. There's a lot of stuff I have to tell young Jenna, but I'll start with those two.
And for me, find your people, find your advocates, find your allies, find the people that challenge you in a supportive way. And it makes all the difference in the world. When you have your people that are your work people, when you have your people that are your personal people, life becomes fun, right? Like you're not a cog in it. You get to wake up and do something that challenges you and fulfills, fills the cup in ways. So find your people.
I think for me, it would be just breathe. And sometimes that's like very natural, and sometimes that takes me a lot of work, honestly. I wish I had understood what that meant earlier. So okay, this has been absolutely fantastic. I know this was just put in the chat, but so everybody's aware, we there is a recording. If you've registered, it's going to go out to you. If you want to get in touch with us, I'm pretty sure you can find all of us on LinkedIn. I know we have each enjoyed this conversation so much, and thank you to Fairygodboss for the conversation or for the opportunity to do this. We'd love to hear from you. There also will be a survey, and I think that's it.